Welcome to the 613 Seconds podcast powered by the Jewish Life Network. Hi, I'm Aaron Friedman, your host, bringing you insightful, unscripted conversations with personalities connected to Baltimore's Jewish community, leaders, thinkers, and influencers who inspire and shape Jewish life. In just about 613 seconds, you'll gain wisdom, perspective, and connection because every second counts. Now, let's dive into this episode of 613 Seconds. All right, and welcome to the 613 podcast powered by the Jewish Life Network. Today we have with us Yonatan Grinberg, who is a noted violinist. Thank you for joining us, Yonatan.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So, where did you originate from? Where are you from originally?
So I was born and raised in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, may have heard of it. And I grew up, I lived for 1 year in LA, which is how come I got relatively good in English. But most of my life in Yerushalayim. And then at the age of 25, I moved to Chicago and then to Baltimore.
So you ended up in Baltimore, but you have a storied career where you developed into a professional violinist. Where did that education begin?
So I started playing when I was 7. The story my mother tells, I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but the story that she says was that at the age of 4, there was a lady who would come to the kindergarten I was at, and she would demonstrate different instruments for us and whatever. And I heard the violin. I came home and I said, "Ima, I need to play violin." And it took her 3 years to take me seriously until she took me to my first violin lesson. So I started at the age of 7. And unlike what a lot of people think, no, I was not a child prodigy whatsoever. I did not practice for many hours when I started off. And I was just another regular guy who mostly wanted to play soccer. That was my main interest when I was a child. And then that kind of changed when I was a teenager. And I started really finding myself in music.
So this is, it's really interesting that it wasn't your parents that pushed you. It was something that was really self-propelled, and you had a drive in you to become a violinist.
So it's interesting. This is actually a conversation I have frequently with parents of students of mine. No, my parents did not force me to decide to go play violin. And once I got to that point that I really wanted it, I had to fight my parents to let me practice more. I would practice until late at night and early in the morning. My parents, I'm sure they loved hearing me open my violin and start scratching it at 6 a.m. in the morning. But I did that, even on summer vacations when I was in high school.
So from a young age, you were interested in becoming a violinist, but did you want to do that professionally?
So no, I wanted to be a soccer player. But which I also practiced very seriously when I was younger, and at times, when I started, I loved it. I was just a child enjoying playing. There were many times though that it did take my parents not allowing me to stop, and I always tell this to parents of students of mine, because everybody goes through these stages that you want to drop it, and then you have so many people who come to me and say, "Oh, I used to play when I was a kid and I stopped, and I'm so sorry I stopped." That's why, to me, the number one goal is just don't stop. Because then you get to the point you have something that remains a skill for life. And then for me, it happens to be that when I was a teenager, something clicked, and I was like, "This is it. This is what I want to do with my life." And I was very far behind my peers. I was at the time in a music high school and in Jerusalem Academy music high school, and I was alongside people who have been practicing hours and hours every day since they were very young children who were child prodigies, and I was like, I need to catch up. So I started practicing, and it was kind of like, I have like in certain movies you have like this collage of somebody working really hard at something. That was me at that time. I was practicing very, very, very hard, Um, and then I went into the once I finished high school, I went into the Jerusalem Academy of Music, and I continued working very very hard, and until I got to the point that I was actually a pretty decent violinist, not all the way there, but you know, um, and then I was told by many people that the next step to do is to go to America. Oh, go internationally. The two main places that most musicians in Israel go to is either Germany or the United States, being two very big musical centers. And Israel is like many other things. It has a lot of talent, but it's also a very small place. So it's good to get out. You'll go anywhere in the world, you'll find many successful Israeli musicians. Um, so
So you left Israel at that point, and did you travel straight to Baltimore?
So I first went, I did my master's degree in Chicago with my teacher and mentor Vadim Gluzman, who is a Russian-Israeli violinist. He's world-renowned, top 10 in the world violinist. He performs with in every major hall in the world regularly. And I met him back in Jerusalem when he came by to give like lessons and master classes, and we immediately clicked, and so I was like, I want to go study with you. So I came, and he was at the time teaching in Chicago. Funnily enough, now he teaches here in Baltimore, but at the time he was teaching in Chicago. So I went and I did my master's, and it's a 2-year program, and we had a conversation, me and Vadim, and he said he thought I should go get a doctorate because that would open doors to potential teaching positions in universities, etc. And so I looked into doctorate programs, and I was very highly recommended to try out Peabody here in Baltimore, and that's how I ended up in Baltimore.
So what role did your Jewish identity play in the development of your musical career?
That's a fantastic question. At first, not that much, I will say. I didn't grow up very from. I would categorize it as Masorti, not like completely not care. Always eat kosher on Pesach and fast on Yom Kippur. But you know, it wasn't a major part of my everyday life, which in some ways, in retrospect, worked for me because I was able to practice those 8 hours a day when I was younger. I honestly don't know if I would have been able to practice that much had I been studying in yeshiva. So it worked for me in that way, and I think my Jewish identity was always in struggle. Actually, growing up, it always drew me very deeply. Learning in every format, davening always was very special to me, and I had kind of like throughout my teenage years, after bar mitzvah and whatever, I had like periods of doing more, doing less, kind of. Um, but it's very hard when you grow up in a certain society, certain school, certain friends. The environment is very formative, and the truth is that in Israel there's a lot of animosity. For me, I actually had to leave Israel to be able to truly come to terms with my Jewish identity without feeling like everything I do or don't do is like a social statement. Here I was just a Jew, and that allowed me to truly come to my own identity with that. Having said that, being a frum Jew and a classical musician is a very difficult combination. Just to give you an idea, I cannot play in an orchestra in the United States because they all perform on Shabbos. The vast majority of concerts that I could do that are not on Shabbos happen in churches, which I can also not do. And let alone the fact that many people survive off of doing a lot of wedding gigs. The only wedding gigs I can do are obviously Jewish wedding gigs. So there's a very large chunk of the market that I'm not even able to access. So it kind of in a way worked as a blessing and a curse. Obviously, financially that is a challenge. But in other ways, it forced me to kind of create my own path and create my own organization, which I run here in Baltimore.
So we'll talk about that in a moment, but I wanted to ask you whether there was a performance or some sort of moment in your career, in your training perhaps, that felt like a turning point for you, that felt like, okay, this is something that is a direction that I could really build my career off of. This is something that I need to develop and get the most out of.
That is a good question. I think there was a number of formative moments. I think one of them was in 2010. I had the incredible privilege to participate in the Perlman Music Program, which is a program for young musicians run by Itzhak Perlman, the famous violinist, and his wife, Toby. Um, and they came, at the time, they did a program in Yerushalayim, in the Jerusalem Music Center, which is a fantastic place. And they brought in some of their musicians from Juilliard and from America. And, they had accepted a few students from Israel, from both the Jerusalem and Tel Aviv academies. And I had the great privilege to participate in that. And I think being in that environment of being surrounded by other musicians, I think was a very formative experience for me.
So you mentioned earlier something really interesting, that to become a violinist or frankly a musician of the level that you're on, it requires a tremendous amount of practice and persistence. Would you say that a frum person who has those types of aspirations is just shooting down the wrong road, that they're not going to be able to reach such a level because it requires such a level of time and commitment that maybe a person within a frum environment would not be able to live up to?
That is a very hard question. That is a very hard question. And it's a question that I grapple with many of my students with. Because it is hard, especially once kids reach high school, which is kind of ironic because that's usually when they really want to start devoting themselves to something. Obviously to their learning, but that's the kids who continue playing until they get to high school. Usually at that point they really want to continue doing it seriously. And many of them want to get to the point that they're doing it professionally. Now, I always try to keep it, on the one hand, I don't want to shoot down anybody's dreams, because who am I to say you can't? Because maybe you can. And I was able at the age of 16, to push forward and get to where I got to. And, if you have the right environment, the right support, there are people who are given more support in certain high schools and certain yeshivas to be able to do more things that are outside of just their learning, and there are yeshivas that are more supportive of that. So I'm not gonna, I don't want to tell anybody you can't. It is very hard, and you have to be very committed. I remember the first time I was teaching, I was like over 10 years ago now. I was teaching a student who was 16. He decided at 16 that he wants to play violin. He was going to local yeshiva here. He would end every day at 9, and he would come to my house after 9 for a lesson. And I was like, I don't know that I would have had your level of commitment. Oh. It's unbelievable. At the same time, he didn't have much time to practice, right? So it's a very, very tricky thing. I do think that getting to the level that you can play chasanas, yes, you can do that. Or for sure, to getting to the level that you can do kumzits, in Milav Malkas and stuff, yes, you can do that. There's no doubt about that. To get to the level that you can play professionally as a classical musician is more challenging. But I've seen people, especially also, people go at 18 and decide that, okay, I'm going to go get a music degree. That's not something that's easy to do while being frum, but it's not impossible.
Got it.
It's not impossible.
So you mentioned that you currently, to be a professional musician is a little bit of a challenge because you have some conflicts as far as Shabbos and venues and where you could play. So how do you stay active right now within your musical career, and professionally? Could you build a career, and have you built a career out of it?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm constantly building a career. My career is a bit like going with a machete in the woods and charting a path for myself. Um, there are obviously concerts that I can do and do. I also have created an organization here in Baltimore that I direct, which is called Chamber Encounters and runs both a program for kids called Baltimore Bows, and also concerts for, well, kids and adults, obviously. Um, and it's, I wouldn't say that right now it's at the point that that's a full time career, but it is growing, Baruch Hashem, and it is something that has a lot of potential, and my goal is to make it as meaningful of an organization for the Baltimore community.
Do you have any upcoming projects, performances, or collaborations that are coming up soon?
Yeah, so part of what we do in Chamber Encounters is a concert series, which is a very, very unusual and innovative concert series because people think, oh, classical music, I don't like that. But the truth is, everybody likes classical music. And I can prove it to you because if you go out in the world, the most successful kind of music is movie music, which is 90-something% of it is classical music. And even when you see those videos that you see at fundraisers and whatever, people are crying, it's so emotional. Listen to the music. Almost all the time, the music is what makes you really feel those feelings. And so what we do in the concerts is not just you come and you listen to music you've never heard before, because that can be very overwhelming, especially without words, without anything to relate to. So first of all, the concerts are all in a circle, so the audience is around the performers, and it's creating a feeling of a communal happening. That's number one. Number two, I always talk before all the pieces of music and give examples so that you're not listening kind of blindly to something you know nothing about, but rather you have some real understanding of what's going on in the music, about the composition, about what's going on with all these performers and all these different instruments doing different things at the same time to understand the background. And we have an upcoming concert which is very, very meaningful to me. It's called The Jews in Music, a musical response to rising antisemitism. So, music is a big thing in the world, and I try to use our concerts to do something meaningful, something relevant. And it's kind of been on my back burner with everything going on in the world in the past few years. And so I decided to there was a very famous anti-Semitic article by a composer by the name of Richard Wagner, who was a known anti-Semite. And he wrote an article called The Jews in Music, which is why he's banned, by the way, in Israel. In Israel, you're not allowed to play Wagner's music. And so he wrote this article attacking Jewish musicians, Jewish composers, about how they're cannot really be good composers because basically because they're Jewish. And so I decided to take his own title in a very Jewish way and turn it on its head. And the concert features music of different Jewish composers of different times and places, including an Italian Renaissance shul composer by the name of Salomone Rossi, including two composers who were murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust, including a piece by Russian Jewish composers who lived in Soviet Russia, dealing with anti-Semitism there, and culminating in an octet, which is 8 musicians playing together by Felix Mendelssohn, which is a monumental, incredible piece of music. So it's going to be a very, very exciting program.
That sounds really amazing. So where could somebody find a little bit more about you? Do you have an online presence or on social media or anywhere else?
So you can find me on social media, both Instagram and Facebook, Yonatan Grinberg, violin, and also my website, yonatangrinberg.com. as well as our concerts, chamber encounters, or baltimorebowls.com. And we also have tickets available online for the upcoming event through Eventbrite, which you can search and find easily.
I'll make sure to link that. Okay, and the final question that we ask all of our interviewees, what is it about Baltimore that you love?
I'll tell you something. I know a lot of people like to complain about Baltimore, but I came here and I decided to stay here. And I love Baltimore even once I finished my degree. I decided to stay here because a few things. Number one, Baltimore has room for humans. I feel like when you go to many of the bigger cities, it's like the city controls the humans, not the humans. There's no room for people as much as I feel in Baltimore. There's more room to create, more room to do, and to create real connections with other people. And I also love the amount of achdus that you see in Baltimore. We still are small enough of a community that you see people that you don't know on Shabbos and you say good Shabbos. There are many other big cities where people don't. So I love that about Baltimore. It feels like it has all the good sides of a small Jewish community in the shtetl, while having a lot of the beauty of a larger community in terms of food offerings, in terms of shul offerings. Everybody can find their place while still staying an achdustic community.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck, Yonatan, and we look forward to hearing your performances.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.